Welcome, DEFCON 18, to You're Stealing It Wrong, 30 Years of Inter-Pirate Battles. My name is Jason Scott, and I am a historian. I'm going to dedicate this talk tonight to Ibrahim Kamsharani, a friend of mine who attended DEFCON, and 2 months later had a really unpleasant car accident that did result in his death. This was, again, in 2004. What I'm saying now is, tonight, spend a little more time with friends you don't normally see, please. Enjoy your time at DEFCON with them. Keep your memories. So I deal in history, and of course in history you can see all sorts of parallels and unusual things. For instance, a 1929 lolcat advertisement here. This is from an advertisement, and it actually suggests, as you can see, it'll brighten up the whole room. Every mother will want one of these 5x8 photos for the nursery. Ha ha ha, it must be so. These, in fact, are Chicagoland gang business cards, a collection of cards handed out by gangs. Around here, the cross is boss, only a bitch wears makeup. I don't know what situation they would hand this to. I would assume to the person that was arresting them. But these sort of unusual ephemera kind of fascinate me as a person who likes to see things. So I'm always collecting items and unusual things, and I've been doing it for a very, very long time. History is important, like this beautiful idyllic scene between two models. This is a rather old photo. It is in fact a photo of Afghanistan from the 1950s. This is that exact same location today. Without those photographs, without people making an effort, without collecting items, we would have no idea about this past history. Again, 100 years ago, this was an article in the New York Times, which it was announced that an attorney general had decided that there was no actual law against women wearing pants. A widow had written asking for permission to wear pants in her own garden, and the attorney general said, well, there doesn't seem to be any law against that. And as the last part of the article says, there's no law prohibiting a woman from wearing men's trousers, especially if she were the head of the house. These kind of unusual phrases and stuff, it's all very kind of fascinating to me because you look at it now with new eyes, right? Everything you see is in three locations. The time it was written, the time it's being written for, and the time at which you're reading it yourself. So these are three different perspectives that these things exist in, and it's always a good idea to see what they're up to. This itself is from HoHoCon in the 1990s. This is a Denver trashing map. This is a collection of places that may or may not have good things to get out of the trash bins for freaks. For instance, Northern Telecom, well-concealed location, AT&T, nice trash. US West, you know, not quite clear. Maybe some of these things are different areas. I wouldn't do this now, by the way. Just saying, don't do it now. Last year, I was a system administration, and I hated it. And eventually I was laid off, and so at that point I said, boy, do I want to do that again? And I thought, well, not really. So I went to Kickstarter, and I proposed an idea, which was, I love doing computer history. I run a site called textfiles.com. I've done a documentary called BBS the Documentary. I've done a whole variety of these other things, which I'll show you. And would you guys like to fund me to do nothing but this for a while? And $25,000 later, people did. So I want to thank the 347 backers on Kickstarter. Without you, I wouldn't be able to spend the time on crazy shit like this. Some of you might be in the room. You need a hug. But I just wanted people to know that, you know, I am actually functioning as a full-time historian right now, and it's a wonderful life, and I'm enjoying it. How much am I enjoying it? This is a photo of my brother. But behind him is a storage container, which I call the textfiles.com information cube. This is a storage container full of computer history. That's when I started to load it in. It actually looks like this right now, because I've been busy editing my movie, which is for sale. But anyway, so this is a collection of thousands and thousands of computer magazines, floppy diskettes, tape. I have the original data tapes of the Free Software Foundation in there. There's a whole variety of artifacts, things, and I've been going through them, and I've posted them online. it's from these archives that I collect things that I'm trying to show people. I believe that the biggest problem, besides being at history when it happens, is recognizing that it's not really your job to decide what the future finds fascinating. And so it's only because of people who are now dead that we understand a lot of different things in this world. So I'm trying to collect things and at least be a depot, to be an alternative to the trash can, to then pass it on to the next group of people. So I have entire collections of Byte, entire collections of Wired, entire collections of 2600, a lot of 2600 pre-production items and so on. Just things that I think might have value in the future. I'll be the guy who safeguards them now. I don't own them, I merely curate them for the next generation. So this talk is about software and piracy. And you have to kind of define those terms. They're very easy terms to throw around, so I just wanted to spend a little time on them. Because right now when people do a lot of work, they kind of go for the surface of things, take it a little bit easy, and I like to try to at least dig a little bit deeper on that. So software. Okay, so software is a little kind of a strange concept, right? Especially when you consider that, you know, people think of software now as a career. They think of it as an environment, a product. They think of it as an actual thing that can be bought, sold, given around. You can be arrested for stealing it. You can be arrested for copying it. You know, it's this ephemeral concept. I use a bunch of books when I'm doing research. This particular book is called, it has an awful title. It's called From Airline Reservations to Sonic the Hedgehog. Ignore that bullshit. I actually have a number of historical books that are just awful because publishers are idiots when they come to titles sometimes, and they say, your book is fascinating, it's deep, and it's interesting, but we need to put Mario on the cover somehow. So they'll do this, and there's one called, like, Play, and it's actually a beautiful work on the video game industry, but it looks like something that's going to have 16 exclamation points after every sentence and just be awful. This book tries to track back the history of software going back to the 50s, and then how different software industries rose up and what that meant and where everything went. Obviously, most of you deal with software every moment of your lives now. Something inside of your pants runs software. Something inside of your car runs software. Maybe something inside of your chest runs software. So it's a concept that has some amount of importance. So I'm just going to go back to the 50s. You can trace concepts of software actually back to the 1800s with looms and punch cards. There's a beautiful talk out there, and I got to see this at the Marble House in Rhode Island. There's a silk covering on walls, this beautiful silk covering, and it had faded terribly over the 100 years that it had existed. It was a Vanderbilt built house, and they wanted to fix it. And they were trying to come up with different solutions, and they contacted the original firm in France that happened to have the original punch cards that originally ran the looms. So they ran another run of it and put up brand new exact duplicate silks. Save your shit. So I'm sure whoever put that back there was like, no, 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 they will reorder. So anyway, so here we are. This is a beautiful podcast by the IEEE Computer Society called Computing Lives. I recommend it heavily. It is basically the human stories behind computers. The first one is about the first computer dating program that was created and how awful it went, and a number of other things. But this discusses the concept of the origin of software bundling. I just want to know, so I know my audience, software bundling, what meaning... Does anyone understand that term before the 70s as opposed to now where it's like, I bought a software and the right to get sued to use it? All right. So here's the deal, right? There's obviously parallel existences out there, but primarily people who are looking back at software will look at the practices of the International Business Machines Corporation, IBM. And IBM, when it sold software, certainly through the 1950s and 1960s, sold it as a bundle. That is to say, you bought a computer, and you also bought their assistance in making it useful, because it was always a big deal to try to justify these insane fucking things. Who would buy $1 million piece of hardware when they're just doing accounting? It's a tough sell IBM came up with a number of innovative cell routines, which is part of why their success. Now, bear in mind, in like the 1920s, there was already a person who they had a party for to celebrate his 50 years with the company. IBM is a very old, very smart company who is not really beholden to their people. It's this thing that kind of exists, which is why it's still around through a lot of pain and a lot of greatness. They're very innovative. So one of the things they would do, I didn't understand this until recently, was that they would sell you a computer that was really expensive for a third of its price, but they were allowed to use it at night, and they would rent it out to other customers who couldn't quite afford buying it for a third. See, they were always trying to kind of bootstart this whole thing. So computing, when it came to software, it was sold as a service. You bought the machine, and when you were like, we're a company, and we make, you know, buggy whips, we don't know how long this is going to last, and we're going to need this kind of accounting, they would send people over to take their software and write it for this machine for you. And it was part of the service, and you paid money for it. What happened was like by the late 1960s, early 70s, a lot of companies are trying to get into that space, and they're claiming IBM as a monopoly, that IBM is going after places that are selling software and claiming it's violating their contracts and it's terrible. And that's how IBM ended up in their antitrust court case. I swear this gets more interesting. I do. So basically IBM unbundled software. They turned software into a separate concept and started selling it that way. Now, other companies had done that, but when IBM did it, suddenly software no longer becomes a service. It becomes its own special entity, not beholden to any particular company. So if you think of a car company also selling the gas, and suddenly now there's gas companies, right? Same idea. That's kind of, so it's a different way of thinking of software. With the advent of the home computer revolution, and I'll get to that in a moment, with the advent of the home computer revolution, suddenly software is something that's kind of coming along, but there's no company to kind of support you. So you're kind of on your own putting together software. But now software is something that if a company comes along and sells a product for it, suddenly all of the hobbyist approach to it of like, we'll just do what we need to do to get the software running, is running straight up against the idea of making a business out of it. And that's where we hear of the famous Bill Gates 1975 letter to hobbyists, which says basically, please allow me to make an awful fuck ton of money. Signed, Bill. I guess they fell for it, huh? So basically, this software company, this software idea starts rising up. Along with that comes home computers. Suddenly, you're not dealing with a company you can push around that has rules of licenses and lawyers. These are just regular human beings who are buying computers as you would buy a vacuum cleaner. You would go to Sears and buy a game of Sorry and a hula hoop and a Commodore 64, right? It's just another thing. And suddenly you're running up against this idea of software as being something you don't want to duplicate and do yourself. But it's so fucking easy. So, right now, in the contemporary space, as we say, there is an awful lot of verbiage talking about piracy and open culture and how do you know, what rights are you given, Creative Commons, a lot of buzzwords and a lot of concepts behind it. Now, I find it easier to grab a distance instead of just punching Cory Doctorow in the nutsack or something. I just would prefer to go back in time to a different, more innocent time. So, here's an ad. This is a public service announcement. I want to say it's about 1984, 1985. It's easy to make a copy. It's quick. It's illegal. It's wrong. Okay? Let's go a little farther here. And again, I want to point out this verbiage, mostly because it should have echoes of today. It's hard to believe. People who wouldn't think of shoplifting a software product on their lunch hour don't think twice about going back to the office and making several illegal copies of the same software. Making unauthorized copies of software is a violation of U.S. copyright law. Yet the problem has reached epidemic proportions because many people are unaware, or simply choose, to ignore the law. The software industry is urging decision makers and software users to take steps to stop software piracy in their organizations. In the meantime, the industry has been forced to prosecute willful copyright violators. There are legal, moral, and economic imperatives forbidding theft of copyrighted software. All of this, of course, echoes common arguments made today about you're destroying everything, right? every time you copy a PlayStation